Call the meeting to order. So, at 5:04 p.m. on January 25th, we call to order the meeting of the Carver Zoning Bylaw Study Group. We'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. The meeting is accessible via Zoom, and I think we'd like to start with a discussion on. The chairman is proposing, I myself are proposing, that the TDR bylaw not move forward to the annual town meeting in April in order for appropriate level of review and discussion by the committee. And we'll have a discussion and vote. If there's a motion made to support that. I think, I don't think we're prepared to do the amount of heavy lifting in the available time, but I'd like to give it, I think we should still work on it, but I will,
All right, I'd like to make a motion to not move forward with the TDR bylaw until after, well, we're gonna be working on it today, but it's not good, will not be presented at town meeting, in April, in order to appropriate level of review and discussion by the committee, discussion and vote.
I'll second that motion.
all right, we open that for discussion.
Could we, Mr. Chair, could we also indicate when we think it might go to town meeting? Like, is there going to be a special in the fall?
If there's a special town meeting in the fall, I think we'd be prepared for that, yes, absolutely.
Right, that's good.
That'll give us, that would be September, August, so that'll give us 4 or 5 months to work on it.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'd like to concentrate on this and then work out the ancillary problems involved with the other bylaws to bring them all into, yes, Mr. Eddings. Yeah, please.
So this board is an advisory board to the planning board.
Yes.
So we would make a motion to advise the planning board that we don't believe the TDR should go on to the town warrant for the next town meeting. I believe that the planning board would have to then make a vote.
It's never, it's actually,
We're not a board that.
correct.
That makes it, I'm just.
The planning board would actually have to move forward and vote to bring this to town meeting as it's not been proposed at this point.
So the vote that we would take would be to advise the planning board that we don't believe we can sufficiently vet this bylaw by the time town meeting comes, and we ask that we have extended time to do that and bypass this town meeting, and then whatever the planning board decides to do.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend the motion that was made to be what he said.
Okay.
Okay, yeah,
So I'll withdraw my original motion
okay.
and go with the amended motion.
Amended as a recommendation. Yeah, currently it's not being proposed for the April town meeting, and I will stand by the decision of this committee, so whether or not the planning board chooses to bring it up and move forward, I would have to vote against it.
I mean, I'm just making sure that we work within the realm that we have. I mean, we don't have that.
Right.
To put that off through town meeting, that's in my opinion.
Right,
I just wanted to make sure.
absolutely, yep, we're just an advisory board, a citizens committee, or more or less a subcommittee. Any more discussion?
So,
Please.
just last meeting, we voted basically to recommend to the planning board not to move forward, and it was just a recommendation, so it's up to the planning board, but I think we've got a strong voice here from the planning board that can say what's gonna happen. Yeah.
Excellent. Seeing no more motions for discussion, all those in favor of the motion?
Should we get a,
Oh,
we
yeah.
can get a second, real, yeah, I don't think we got a second, right?
Oh, you got a second.
Did we get a second on the second? I withdrew the original motion, that I made,
Oh.
I thought you
yes,
seconded
proposed-
my motion.
and Sarah seconded that. Oh, yeah. How did that go? I forget.
Yeah, I seconded your original motion, and then
Okay.
I amended the motion to be how Duke framed it. That we're just recommending to the
Yes.
planning board that they, and I thought you seconded that, but.
Well, I,
Did I second that?
Oh.
Well, I'll second it right now.
Okay.
Okay. That'll take care of that. Have a short memory.
no, that's fine. I got lost in that one too. So all those in favor of,
Mr. Chair?
yes, please, Jim,
Roll
sorry.
call vote.
Roll call vote?
Yep.
All those in favor of the motion, roll call vote?
Bruce Mackey, yes.
Cornelia Shea, aye.
Sarah Hewens, aye.
Chuck Meredith, aye.
Fran Mello, aye.
Adam Holmes says aye.
David Elton said aye.
And that's unanimous, so motion passes, and that will be our recommendation to the planning board. All right, next on the agenda is discussion of draft TDR bylaw and map through Serpent.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Helen Zinkavage. I am the Assistant Director of Environmental Programming at SERPED. So myself and my colleague Bill, who you know I think, we've been tasked with looking at the bylaw and working with you all to kind of try and update it. I'm happy to hear that even though it might not be on the original timeline envisioned, that this committee is still open to considering the TDR bylaw. It is a really unique bylaw, and the purpose of it, I think we've had previous meetings where everyone understands, we want to preserve the sending areas, channel growth to receiving areas. That purpose is still very valid. We just want to make sure that everyone's comfortable with the bylaw's mechanics, how it works, and where it applies in town. So,
If I could, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Before we start off, I know this is the same presentation that you gave, I think, to the planning board originally, or
it's kind of the next step. Yeah.
the next step, okay. But I was just wondering, before we even start off, how did Carver arrive at this TDR bylaw? Is a TDR bylaw, is that something that other towns have in Massachusetts, or is this just something new?
It is something that other towns in Massachusetts have. So, for example, Plymouth has a TDR bylaw. It's kind of one of the ways that the name of it is escaping me, but there's a large kind of development in South Plymouth. The way that got built was through a TDR. They're certainly not unique to Massachusetts either. Where I worked previously to Massachusetts was New Jersey. In New Jersey, there's whole regions that operate with TDR. So the Pinelands area has TDR areas. It's a pretty widespread practice at this point. I would say in the planning realm, but it's widespread, but not actually used on the ground often. So to have an example in Plymouth nearby where it was used on the ground is an interesting thing for this region.
So-
And then Bill, do you want to add? Because I know.
Just
Go
a
ahead.
point of information.
Bill, I'm sorry, could you use the microphone? There's a seat up here or over there, just so people at home can hear it when it's going out there.
Yeah, just as a point of information, it's been around in Massachusetts since the late 70s and early 80s. Groton passed it and Sunderland passed it. And like Helen said, the thing is most people haven't taken the first step, but it has been on the books and has been touted practice. It's also in the state Smart Growth Toolkit, which has been around since 2008. So there's sufficient guidance, and the fact that it has been put into practice, at least passed, so you're not alone.
Yeah, so the other question that I have is that this must have been brought in by a planning board years ago, and I think not that long ago, because Sarah was.
It was when Jack Hunter was
Yeah,
here, yeah.
when Jack was here.
Mhm.
So what was the purpose that this was brought to Carver and made one of our bylaws?
Actually, this was brought up in 2000 when Larry Clough did your master plan. And you were also working with the Carver Plymouth Wareham Task Force when 80 Makepeace had proposed it. And if you remember the slide presentation that Helen, Grant, and myself put together the first time around, just to get the planning board and residents up to speed, we talked about that history. it was very vaguely alluded to in your 2000 master plan. In fact, it was kind of hand drawings and hand maps. But it presented the idea of TDR being a practice that would benefit Carver in the future. And it went on, they tried to do the bylaw, actually, 2004, and this is in the history of the slides, too. I brought this up. In fact, I did the narrative that night. 2004, 2005, 2006, they tweaked a preliminary bylaw. Unfortunately, the map was always left behind. It was what I called the ghost map in Larry Koff's original Carver master plan.
That's right.
And then in 2008, 2009, Jack Hunter tried to do something with the South Coast rail corridor study maps. We called them the bubble maps, priority protection, priority development areas. And that map was never put into the bylaw either. The bylaw was again tweaked. And then in 2017, when we were doing your master plan, we went back, we revisited those priority protection, priority development areas, and really refined them down to parcel level, the whole bit. And we made some recommendations for the bylaw, things that could be done to perfect the bylaw so that you could use it either with a map or interpretive based on criteria. And that's where we are right now. The fact that you've always had some version of the bylaw, it's always been somewhat imperfect. So now we're trying to make the bylaw match up to the intents and purposes of what you've always wanted as a community. Kind of marry the map concept, the criteria concept, and the exact language that you've always needed. So that's where a quick history lesson, that's where we are.
Okay, I just wanted to know, not having been initially here when that was done, I just wanted to see what happened at the beginning and why this arrived in Carver. And
That's the advantage of being older than dirt and haven't been around forever. That's the only difference between me and you.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that's the only question. I thank, excuse me for interrupting you.
Not at all, and definitely feel free to interrupt and ask questions as we go through this. Like, we'll just have a conversation, basically. So, when I look at that bylaw, going through and kind of trying to ferret out the pieces to make that previous presentation, what I came down to was that there's two kind of main problems, right? There's the map problem. So where in town does this apply? It's not super clear right now at all in the bylaw. That's the most kind of main first problem. And then there's kind of the second consideration of, okay, well now we have this bylaw, we saw the steps about how you calculate kind of the credits from the sending and the receiving and all those areas. How do we feel about that process? Is the bylaw explicit enough about that process? So to me, it's the map issue and the calculation issue. So tonight we're focusing in these materials on the map issue. And as Bill said, we kind of thought we wanted to take a hybrid approach. We want to make sure that there's some basis of kind of core area where you can look at a map and say, these are the sending areas, these are the receiving areas. We've already vetted it. We already kind of have a baseline understanding of what we think the sending and receiving areas are in Carver. But you can't anticipate every single thing in a bylaw like that, right? So alongside of the map, having a set of criteria that says, okay, if you're not included in a sending or receiving area on the map, you might still be eligible, but you're going to have to prove it to us as an applicant, and you're going to have to prove it to us using one of these certain criteria. Okay, so we started off with having this process. Its roots are in the 2017 TDR review process. So SERP had already took one bite at this apple back in 2017. And it was based on the master plan recommendations and trying to implement some of those recommendations that we rectify that map issue in the bylaw. So at that time, there was a public process that went to used what Bill alluded to before, the South Coast Rail kind of bubble map, priority development and priority preservation areas, and kind of nail those down to be more specific. So that's the first layer of what you're seeing here on the map. I have it displayed up on the screen so we can all kind of look at it together, or I think everyone has copies. But basically these, the green areas here, those are what were defined as the priority preservation areas. AKA the things that will become sending areas in this type of bylaw, right? So this is the land that community voiced strong preference for preserving and channeling development away from. So those priority preservation area tracts take up about 6,500 acres of Carver, which is about 26% of the town's land area. Alongside those, we have in purple the core here, the core that has the black outline around it. Those are the priority development areas that were identified in the 2017 process. So the priority development areas, where AKA what would become the receiving areas in a TDR bylaw, those take up about much less land, only about 4.5% of the town, clocking in at around 1,140 acres, say. So we felt it was important to do some of that preliminary land analysis so we can kind of all understand exactly how much land we're talking about when we kind of try to envision the priority preservation and priority development areas. Any questions about that so far? Okay. So that's where we started. And then Bill and I kicked this around a little bit. We looked at the other elements of the master plan and some layers like the sewer service area, water service area, and zoning bylaw map in town. And, you know, as a professional planner, again, you know, we are always kind of studying land use and land use arrangements, and looking at it with that eye, it's pretty clear that those priority development areas are very linear, and they're very kind of business oriented, and they're centered along the main arterials, which is great because it's near existing transportation infrastructure. And up in the northwest corner, it's near water and sewer service area. But it is slightly limiting in that you are setting yourself up for potential development that is similar to what we might call kind of a strip mall type development, the kind of strips of kind of commercial areas that line those main thoroughfares. So as we kind of consider this, we're like, okay, well, those areas, they're all surrounded by the residential agricultural district, which is kind of focused heavily on residences and agricultural areas. So we started playing with the idea of potentially thinking about, okay, how could we still base this in the priority development areas that were identified, but open it up a little bit so that you give a slightly extended opportunity to incorporate some of that residential area around those commercial thoroughfares. So we kicked it out. We tried two different scenarios. We tried a 1/4 mile buffer and a 1/2 mile buffer. And the reason we pick a 1/4 and a 1/2 mile is because these correlate to walking times. So a 1/4 mile is typically, I think, a 5-minute walk to 10-minute walk. A 1/2 mile is kind of 10 to 15-minute walk. So in the spirit of kind of thinking about how you would want to develop these more intensely and slightly more dense areas in town, thinking about ways to also make them walkable communities that incorporate some of the surrounding residential area. That's why we made that decision to kind of test those test cases. So when we do that, we get to the bottom 2 rows in the chart here. So having the priority development areas plus a 1/4 mile buffer, that gets you, I should have done the subtraction, but it's about, I think it's a little less than 2,000 more acres. And so instead of covering 14.5% of town, now it's up to 13.7% of town. And 1/2 mile seems a little bit much because at 1/2 mile you're getting up to more acres than the priority preservation area, and north of 30% of the town. So we're just trying to looking at some of those benchmarks, trying to see where we might find a fit. That was our thinking process there. Any questions at this point?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, just the one looking at it, you're basically taking the existing areas and gonna make them more dense. Would it make more sense to leave those all alone, take a remote area and build your village there, brand new?
In an ideal world, I think that that would make sense in the sense that you're like, okay, we could develop something. We don't have to worry about what's already existing. We don't have to worry about, we're going to pipe in all the infrastructure. We're going to pipe in all of the sidewalk and roadway infrastructure that we need to. Because we are constrained by those, because it's easier to build off of existing infrastructure networks, that's why we made the decision that we did to build off of kind of these already identified nodes of development, areas with slightly higher development potential. Another reason we went off of these is because the process to develop these PPAs was a publicly facing process, and so there's already been some community buy-in about like these specific purple clumps, for lack of a better word, rather than like thinking about an area outside. We wanted to keep within those parameters. Yeah.
My question was on the PDA.
Fran, I'm sorry, Fran, can you use your mic?
On the PDA plus a quarter, is that 3,492 acres the entire parcel, or do you have to add the 1.13? So do you add those two together?
They're already aggregated.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay.
Helen? Sorry,
Sorry.
I think Duke was next and then.
Yeah, Mr. Eddings, please.
Ernest, you indicated that you came up with these areas for development, the primary areas for the receiving and developing, right? So you indicate that for a preferred development is where you want building, and preferred receiving, you want to protect historic areas and scenic vistas and all this other stuff, correct? And this map indicates that it says Historic Village Center District, and it's all purple. So then we look at this area that's highly purple, and right now, they have the school, the new police department, they have the fire station, they have the town hall. How many areas are still left in that area for how many units? And the same thing, when you go to North Carver, you have the North Carver historic area where you have the green, and then you have a lot of bog, wetland area up there. How many exactly? I know all those acres can't be completely upland area. And then when you go to South Carver, I know the historic district is looking to put the Furnace Brook Historic District down there. When we look at that area, how many acres down there is buildable in respect to the purple areas, and how much is already built on that wouldn't be built on anyways? I mean, the area is sufficient to put in 3, 5, I think minimum in a village district, 3 areas, but I don't know what the unit capacity, the density that they would be looking for in those areas. So.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and it is definitely one that we should look in, can look into and should look into. We have the ability to look at assessment data for all the parcels in the areas that's identified, and to understand what's already developed and what's still available. And then part of that, my statement is escaping me, but I know. So first we would need we would need to define 2 things first. I think we would want guidance about exactly which areas we should be looking into. Like, is it that, should we forget about the half-mile buffer and focus in on just understanding maybe the other 2 categories, like the kind of core and then the quarter-mile buffer? So that would be something we would need guidance from you guys on, kind of defining the extent of what you want to look into. And then the second piece would be to think of a density that we would, like, if we can get into parcels that are available, but if we want to know the units that would generate, we would first also have to come to agreement about what kind of test density we would want to apply to that calculation.
I mean, that's the information, not to jump in, but I think that's the information when this committee was formed to start these conversations about this bylaw. then it was supposed to be conversed with us, and then we were supposed to be the median in between the board and the public. So once it comes to a determination, like you say, you can give us these information about density and lead time, then we can kind of have public hearings on that in respect to what this town would look like to the people who reside in this town. So that's why I asked.
I completely agree, because once you start having those public conversations, that's what people are going to ask, right? They're going to want to know the specifics, like what would this mean in the, aka, a worst case or a most built out scenario. So yeah, what if we, as we progress here down the line, understanding the area we should look into and the like test density would be what we need to take the next step.
Bill?
I think that's what, Helen's making a great point, and your question was good too, because that's what this is all leading to. And you gotta remember, we're going back to the master plan, where this map was established by the community, the priority protection, priority development areas. So by adding these rings around those certain areas, it accomplishes two things. It brings in a little more of the land that was shown in the 2010 open space plan, where we said before, back in, I think it was October, when the first meeting, we said if we did all of that, the town would be 82% protected, but virtually preclude development. So doing it this way, going out the quarter mile, half mile, again, you're going back to like smart growth principles that the state's put out there, and things that you folks said in your master plan. You wanted more livable, walkable communities and livable, walkable development. We get it. So the quarter mile radius and the half mile, it's like 5-minute, 10-minute type of destination points. So that's why if we throw that out there and look at the potential that's out there, that's why we give it to you guys. You guys can make recommendations then to forward on certain areas, certain aspects of it. So this is what it's all about. That's what we're getting at tonight.
Please, Ms. Ewens.
Hi, Helen. I just have a couple of minor, I guess they're map corrections, and then I have an actual substantive question for you. The first one, Duke mentioned the Historic Village Center District. I don't believe our Carver Center is a historic district. I think it's a village district. I'm pretty sure that's
Right, Savory Ave falls somewhere south of
well, Savory Avenue is down here in green. It's completely out of that whole purple circle. So
I should clarify that. So those names don't have any like connection to zoning or like regulatory stuff. It's whatever they were called. Every clump got a name when these analyses were done. I don't know exactly how they developed them, but it might just be like.
Well, I'm just pointing out that maybe it would cause less confusion if we just called it what it was, which is the Carver Center Village District.
Okay, so that we can definitely change it.
And then on the Great Cedar Swamp logging lot area,
Center.
It's not called that either. It's called the Great South Meadow Cedar Swamp.
All right,
And it's probably more than this green blob. It's over 600 acres. So those little tiny green lots you see above that big green blob, they're all in that. So it actually takes up a much bigger area than I think is being shown here.
Okay.
And then you mentioned something about, I know, it was in this document here, it mentioned existing sewer service. We don't have town sewer. So I'm not sure. I mean, I understand you're probably talking about infrastructure,
Yeah.
but we don't have town sewer.
Okay. I'm just clarifying that it's the infrastructure. Yeah.
So, and then my main point, I guess, was what's, and I guess this is just a question of, 'cause I know how hard it is to make a map and put the label like right where you want it, because the label has too many words in it. But where it says South Carver Industrial Area, I'm assuming that refers to the dark purple spot up the street, because south of that is pretty much wet all the way to the town line. Crane Brook goes through there. There's a big swamp to your right as you're going down south on 58. So this purple, just to let you know, might not work right there. There's a lot of bogs, there's a lot of swamp, there's a lot of water.
That's really good to know. And that's something that would also, relating to the last question, if we did like that kind of build out type of analysis, we would start to flag some of those unbuildable.
Right, and it's just below that South Carver Industrial Area of the dark purple, which actually on the open space and recreation plan maps was shown as needed to be protected. So,
Mhm.
but I think you'll find that the circles can't be expanded all that much there.
Okay.
Hate to be
No,
bearer of bad news, but
no. It's fine.
Say, Sarah, I think those, a lot of the purple areas showed up in the PPA, PDA maps, the revised PPA, PDA maps. So-
yeah. Well, I'm saying that
Yeah, so they should be corrected.
They should be
from the
corrected.
Original master plan.
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Because what we did, we built the maps off the original master plan work. And I think one of the things that was assumed also up north was that you may be able to get sewer access going north up 58 from Middleborough, if that's possible.
We don't have sewer. We
No,
don't
no,
want
no.
sewer.
Could you? I think that was one of the things that was speculated.
Well, I think when we talked about that in the master plan, the whole point was once you get sewer, then you don't need the separation between septic tanks and wells, and then you get build out,
Right,
which I don't think is what the community wanted when we did the master plan.
right.
So I don't think there's any sewer plans here. Yeah.
Okay. That will ultimately limit the density that is possible. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, some of these big areas that are already built have large septic systems. I don't know. I mean, that's just something you'll have to look into. I
Yeah.
just wanted you to be aware. We don't have sewer, and I don't imagine. I mean, I'm not just speaking for myself. So it was a large community effort to write the master plan,
Yeah.
and that was certainly not something that was wanted.
So okay, I have a couple. I just want to clarify one thing before we get past it. What did you Sarah, should the Cedar Swamp be called? I'm sorry, I missed that.
All right, the Great South Meadow Cedar Swamp.
Great.
Is that wetland? Isn't that predominantly wet?
It is. Mm-hmm.
So if that's in the core sending area,
Yeah,
and
you-
it's already protected, why wouldn't it be in the light agreement? Because you can't give away a building
Mhm.
parcel
Mm-hmm.
if it's already protected.
That's a good point.
So
yeah.
shouldn't those areas that are already wet and protected be taken out of the sending area map so that they match the color they actually are?
Yeah, it
Sure.
is. It is a swamp.
Yeah.
So that should tell you.
My guess is that not having developed these originally, that maybe it is just exactly the boundaries of the swamp, or maybe there was also some surrounding land that got included in these blobs. But we can definitely check into that and net out things that are already preserved.
Yeah, there was a narrative that went along with the PPA, PDA, so you can see why people selected the certain areas that they did. My guess is people were trying to probably throw protection around the entirety of what they saw as natural resource assets.
That could be. Yeah.
I think that's it, like you wouldn't want roads going through
Right.
there, you wouldn't want anything else going through there. That's probably why you get the lot division up there too, Sarah, around the parcels,
Mm-hmm.
to show that there was access to them in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
I think people just wanted them entirely protected. I think one of the issues that came up with that was flood storage, too, just flood storage.
Oh yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And groundwater protection. Yeah.
What is Makepeace development area? Because my understanding, there was a development that was supposed to go there, and now it's been changed over to solar or something?
I think so. I think it has been.
They still have a lot of
But
land
I'm
out
saying, is
there.
that, like you said, that there's other areas in this map that are ID, is it really an area in Carver that's called Makepeace development area, or is that just like a note for you guys?
I think that was an area, at one point, Makepeace was considering development in that area.
Mm-hmm.
A big development, yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the joint, Carver, Wareham, Plymouth task force that was
Car-
looking into that.
Yeah. Carver
And
Wareham.
then, more recently, they have approved a couple major solar fields down in that part of town.
Yeah.
It's not zoned different or anything, I mean,
But it's still the RA.
it's just sort of, I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, when we look at a map, I don't know when it's, like North Carver Commercial Business Corridor, that's an actual zoned area, correct?
Yes.
As opposed to something else like
Yeah.
that. That's all.
Yeah.
I know they did the landowners down there, but
Yeah. If I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Sorry. So Makepeace has about 3,000 acres in Carver, but and I don't know how much of that's in solar down there now, but it's quite a bit. I get the planning board would probably know better than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can it be a?
Recent projects have been approved down in that area.
So how
Yes.
could it be a receiving area if it's all built out with solar? I guess is that your
Well, I guess-
question?
It,
Sorry.
Well, I
Right.
guess part of it is
Right.
that they haven't been constructed yet. And so, which they're getting their permits right now, so they're starting the building permit process. So that's something new that we would have to
Okay.
provide. And then the other thing too is that usually there's about a 20 to 30-year time frame on the property, so right now, once they're constructed, then you're in a time frame with that particular solar company, but at the end of the 20, 30-year period, then that land would be available again for future development. Or it could continue on as something else at that time.
It could continue on as solar or who knows. We haven't done that yet. We've just come into building the solar projects. We haven't seen one go past 20 years yet.
You can always take it down for the right price too, right?
I would imagine so, yeah.
I'm saying, technically,
Mhm.
it's nothing that, once they put there, that they have to guarantee to the town that they're gonna be there for that amount of period. That's just a contract they have with the solar company. At some point, they dig that up and haul it away,
Mm-hmm.
that land becomes back to any use they want.
Yeah, I think you gotta remember too, that right now you're kind of in between your 2017 master plan.
Mm-hmm.
Today, what's reality today, like Jim said, people are actually going in and applying for the permits today. What might be a sunset lease, which will be 20 years, and probably another master plan in the interim. So you're dealing with what we have on the map, and that's the real, again, value of this exercise. And we can talk out things like this and say, okay, this has changed, this has changed, this is labeled this. So now we can get it straight, and once you get everything straight, you can see what you're really playing with as far as pieces that you have to work with.
Yeah.
So that's really, again, the value of this.
Mm-hmm.
So we're giving you what you got, and we can push on from there.
Okay, so we can make those corrections on the map. At this point in time, before we kind of move on, and I know the committee is kind of considering its pacing with other bylaws that are being reviewed and pacing for this TDR bylaw in general. But I would love to get direction from you guys. So when I go back to the office, what areas should I look at? Should I look at just the core purple areas when I try to do the build out analysis, or should I look at also the quarter-mile buffer?
For sure, the core, but there's,
On infrastructure.
Oh.
I don't wanna cut somebody off, sorry.
please, Adam. No, go ahead, Dave.
That's the only question I have, is the half-mile buffer and all that to a walking zone? Well, development within a half hour of like downtown here, the village district, it may be good for building because they can walk it, because they may not need to, because the traffic would be so backed up that the only way they can get around this town is to walk. So I haven't seen any traffic studies or anything, what the impact of 60 units would have on a one-way road that
Yeah.
goes to and from.
We're not going to be able to do that kind of analysis. I'm going to just say that up front. We're kind of taking what's already here and we can do the build out in terms of what is still developable, and then how many theoretical units that could net at a certain density. But we can't, because having sat on, I used to be a planning board planner and a zoning board planner in my previous life, and done site plan reviews and understand the nuances that every single project has in terms of a traffic study or it's so dependent on the specific site that we wouldn't venture into that kind of analysis. We can give the overall impact, but we can't really comment on a specific theoretical development project in terms of traffic flow or stuff like that.
If I could, just,
Please.
I mean, looking at this, there's a couple of ways to look at this, and from what I see from this map that's in front of us tonight, these build-out areas are near the highways, so we won't have to. It's not a big deal about the road infrastructure anyway. People would live there or whatever, and then jump on the highway and go to work and do whatever they had to do. So it may, I mean, you can't stop people from going through town, but it would probably limit as best you could the number of the traffic of people going to work every day. Whereas if you, it was brought up about, taking an area, and I thought about that too, like Makepeace owns a lot of land in South Carver, so if they wanted to go, not develop one area of land that they have and yet concentrate all their all the development in another spot in South Carver, you have to figure, well, does the road structure really handle all that with all the small roads and everything we have out there? And, I think that this is probably the best way to go to keep it by the highways. I mean, just as a quick look at it, it seems like that's a good way to deal with the traffic and concentrate the buildings near those areas.
Sure. One other thing to think about is, today we have the pandemic going, and a lot of major companies are now rethinking having to have employees show up at a workplace all the time. So it could be after the pandemic, that kind of changes some, so people won't have these commutes from communities, so you won't have the same type of traffic patterns that you had pre-pandemic. So that's kind of another kind of future thing we've got to think about, and we're not really sure where that's going to take us at this point. And it could be maybe there's sort of decentralized workplaces where maybe on Route 58 coming off of Route 44, where a company might have a commute center, so instead of people driving all the way up to Boston or Braintree or one of those inner areas, they might have satellite offices where people can kind of get together and meet. And so then that changes the nature of commuting in the town.
Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Nope, sorry, Adam.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it. And as somebody who, wasn't actively engaged in these conversations back when the original master plan was done, I was fresh out of high school and still in college. So it's helpful to look at this and sort of analyze it, and with a somewhat, maybe different perspective. What part of the reason why I wanted to be on the committee and have this dialogue is I think there's sort of this elephant in the room, right, with this whole concept of TDR and what we're trying to accomplish. Because what I might think is important to accomplish, or Bruce thinks he wants to accomplish, or Sarah wants to accomplish, could be entirely different as it relates to the character and the goal, the character of the town, but also the goal of what we want to accomplish through this bylaw, right? And I might be somebody who says, along the lines of what Bruce just said, if we're gonna collaborate with developers to write a TDR bylaw that facilitates and encourages this growth in the right areas, well then maybe we want to look at the 495 interchange in South Carver and the 44 interchange in North Carver and nowhere else. I mean, I think the one thing that I hear more than anything else from everybody in this town when it comes to a tax discussion or a development or a school or a police station or anything is we want to maintain the rural character of this town. I'm not sure that a dense residential development, let's say 20 years from now, somebody buys Carver Square and decides to put 50 units where Carver Square currently sits, right? I don't know that preserves the rural character of Carver. And so this condensed development, or this area in downtown Carver in the center of town as an area that could be a receiving area, I don't know that maintains the rural character of our town. That's my personal opinion. But it's one of those things where we as we analyze this bylaw and think about how we want to proceed and to answer your questions, right, and give you the guidance that you're looking for, I think it behooves us as a committee to really have a dialogue about what it is we want to accomplish. Again, what I want to accomplish might be different than you, Mr. Chair, right? So when you look at the areas in South Carver, for instance, and I know them all over the map, literally, pun intended, but if you look at that area in South Carver, I could pull up the GIS, and in 30 seconds, like Sarah pointed out, a lot of that's wet. You're talking about shoehorn areas where you might fit 10 houses. We're not talking about a significant area. So if we want a TDR bylaw that makes sense to actually be utilized in an area so in a way where it facilitates growth it doesn't make sense to identify this as an area because there's just not a lot of opportunity there for development. So I just think as a committee and as a town, we should be having honest conversations with ourselves about what we want as a community. And then also honest conversations about what we can do as it relates to this bylaw to accomplish what we want. Because I don't think it makes sense to send you off to identify you can pick a 2-acre buffer, I mean a 2-mile buffer. It's not gonna work in certain areas. 50% of the town is covered with wetlands and bogs. So we just don't have a lot of areas where this can even be done. And it doesn't make sense to identify areas. That Makepeace area might be perfect for it. But the other areas, there's only one little area near the Tremont and Main Street interchange or connection where there's upland, but the rest of it's all wet. I just think it makes sense for us to have honest conversations about what we want to accomplish here with this bylaw, and then identify areas that make sense based on that. That's all.
Agreed.
We need-
I would also, I would just say that traditionally the craftsmen, tradesmen, and merchants would be working out of the same residence or structure. And for instance, here in town, we have a couple places, let's say across from Eagle Gas there, that could really use the opportunity to put in some commercial business with some apartments over it. We have the Cranberry Barn up here on the left, which is getting somewhat old and it's underutilized for its space. I know the church has a lot of issues in its structure, and I'm not talking about putting up 50 houses. I think it has to be a smart growth, and it has to be limited, because again, we don't want huge amount of traffic in the center of town. We want to keep it up north, and maybe I don't know what the availability for water is over in the Spring Street area where we're putting in an innovation district. Is that correct? So we're looking at offices and manufacturing in that area. So I don't know what the availability of water is, but I know that from what I'm looking at here, these are the 3 main water sources for our town, and I think that's where they went with the build out on it. And I do want to see growth in the center of town. I just don't want to see overgrowth. I don't want it to end up looking like the center of Quincy, or the center of Braintree, or downtown Boston, just overbuilt. I think it needs to fall within certain characteristics of the neighborhood. Like if Mamma Mia's over there, had a couple apartments over it, I don't think that would overly affect either the aspect of the town in how it is, like adding a few places here and there. But again, yeah, I wouldn't want to see 50-unit development anywhere near the center of town. I'd like to see an expansion up 44, but to High Street, but to the Spring Street Innovation District, but again, the water availability is going to be the big issue with that one.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, the green area, as you know, above 44 is the coal property,
Yes.
which is the source of our town water
Yep.
for business up there. I don't know whether, the availability of it to feed that Spring Street Innovation area, but
Well, I only mentioned it because I know there's a water tower up in that area.
that's true. But it's not our tower.
right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a big question, because would the developer pay for it? They wanted water, I guess they
have to
would.
fall under
Yeah.
develop, yeah.
So,
Plus they have that huge warehouse over there, Cisco,
yeah.
and I know they have water there too. But it might be worth looking into tying into, but again, that's outside the scope of the meeting here this evening.
Could I just say one more thing?
Yep.
So, to your point, Helen, too, I know it may not feel like we're helping very much, but we really are, because I think the problem is, and you probably did this already, but I think when at least the years that I was on the planning board, we kept trying to make this work. The problem is there just isn't a lot of vacant land that isn't bog or wet. In the South Carver area, for example, I think the land that's down there being used now is pretty much it. I don't know if that's, but I mean, you'd probably need a, the assessor's map or something, or the, just some kind of other map of Carver that actually showed what's where and what's buildable. Topo map on your left, assessor's map on your right. I don't know.
I mean, we have very, frequently working GIS with wetlands layers
I'm
from
sure.
the state with assessment parcel layers. So it's not that we could not combine the two. We can. We just need a place to start, and unfortunately, doing it for the whole town isn't quite feasible. So we do.
No, I know it's really hard, but I guess this is just a wild thought, and it's probably not gonna go anywhere. But there are already some neighborhoods that are relatively dense, and I don't know anything about how that would work if some of the existing the neighborhood may not want it. That's the important issue, but. I mean, I just don't know. Offhand, I don't really know how it's going to work really well. I wish we could find an answer.
Well, Helen, could you take, say, two areas on the map, say the very top north one? We know that the one up north at the Route 4458 interchange, we do have a redevelopment area up in that northwest corner, and there's a master developer who's working to attract a commercial developer to that site, and they're looking at probably trying to get a grand slam by trying to get one major corporation to locate there, with maybe 1.5 million square feet of development on the northeast side of that. And on the right-hand side, between Route 58 and the Cove property, there's not a lot of land in there. There's a lot of wetland. There's one parcel that's currently undeveloped, but the owner of that property is, just starting looking at concepts for that property, but most likely some form of commercial development. That's right behind the new, was it Numea gas station? I can't even pronounce it right. So he owns property behind that, and there's probably about 20 acres of, close to the 10 acres of buildable out of a 30-acre parcel.
Yeah.
So that pretty much takes care of that north piece. But if you're looking, part of it is looking, where would you maybe put some additional residential development? Maybe focus on that area south of 44, but along 58. And then what if you extended, the boundary out a little bit, the buffer zone, and say, okay, can we do a little bit in-depth and look at some of the wetlands and the floodplains, that kind of thing, the 100-foot buffers. Can we overlay that on some parcels, showing the parcels up there, so that then you can say, okay, well, generally speaking, there's X number of, acres of uplands that would be available for development, say in that particular slice of area. And then maybe do the same thing, do kind of a test with the Carver Center district. And then look at those two areas to say, okay, can we do a little bit more in-depth look at this area, carve out the wetlands, and then what remains is potentially developable land. And then of course, then we have our other tools then, which are, our various types of cluster subdivision. We have, townhouse that all have requirements for spacing and density, and so those then could be looked at as potential development tools within that particular area. You could probably do something where you say, okay, if someone were doing a conventional subdivision in here, single-family homes, all right, maybe they could get 20 houses. All right, how does that translate into another form of development based on the amount of dry land that's available? Is that something you can maybe do, just to kind of maybe focus on a couple of detail areas
Mhm.
Maybe not focus on some of the other areas quite yet, further along.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to get an idea of, and in those specific areas, we can drill down and do that kind of analysis. Yeah.
I would also pull the historic district out, leave the village in, but the rest of the district out. I know that's in North Carver. I can't tell by the map where it
The
runs.
Savory Avenue one is the pale green.
Oh, okay, so that's out of it.
It's-
And I would add, is it Pond Street that runs around Sampson Pond? I would try
No.
and-
That's Meadow Street.
Oh, Meadow Street. I would see about limiting development on that. The town's looking to buy
Oh, yeah.
some
Oh,
property
yeah, absolutely.
for resources in that area too.
Well, and that's, fortunately, they do have it labeled as all dark green, so that would be a good thing. If I could just add one more thing, Mr. Chair?
Please.
So, to Jim's point, up in North Carver, I really like that idea of looking at the parcels because there are some parcels, but they're not always contiguous, and it's hard to just say. Well, I mean, I like the idea of a 1/4 mile walking area, but 3/4 of the area is already built out. It's private property. Where are you going to walk?
Mm-hmm.
And but the Aubuchon actually has a lot of land between the Aubuchon and the entrance ramp on the 44. Is that something somebody can work with? I have no idea. But that most of that is pretty upland, and I don't know the exact acreage there. But that you made me think of it talking about the
What's that?
whatever the gas station across from
Behind
Aubuchon.
the gas station,
Right.
not owned by the gas station.
It's a bit 29 acres, but only about 10 of it is buildable. Yeah.
Now, let me ask a question. Maybe you know this, Jim. The strip of land to the east side of 58, it's north of 44, that runs from, say, the gas station all the way up to where the Country Mouse is. What's...
On that right-hand side of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, so part of that is this 30-acre parcel that surrounds the gas station site. Then there's wetlands that go for quite a bit.
Okay.
And then there's the, somewhere along the line, there's the Oh Deer business
Mm-hmm.
that's located there. And I'm kind of fuzzy for the rest of
And then they own about 2 lots there. Between them and the gas station, it's pretty wet.
Okay.
And then it's the Oh Deer, and then it's the Country Mouse, and that's it.
Right, and give opportunities to the old Shaws for greater development potential in that area, easily accessible to the highways.
Well, we'd have to look at the wetland maps. I don't know because between the backs of those lots that we were just talking about, behind them is the Winnetoxet River,
Right.
and then the coal property. So it's like it's a puzzle. Like where do you get a 1/4 mile? It's almost impossible.
Mr. Chair?
Please, yeah. Let's start with David in the back, and then.
It's like it's a 20-acre parcel, a 30-acre parcel, but only 10 acres is buildable. Well, when you add the density that could be allowed in there, I mean, you get quite a bit of units in 10 acres of land.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're not talking about 10 house lots, am I correct? So
Right.
if you're talking about increasing the level of affordable or over 55 housing, I would think 10 acres, it can carry, 60, 70 units, am I right? In an area, I'm not trying to say that, which would be what the town's really looking for. Is We're looking for an alternative to moderate or affordable housing units. So if there's a 10-acre piece of land that's right off the highway that we can get that amount of units in this town, I just don't think it's something to say we only have 10 acres. I
Right.
think
No,
10
Oh, no,
acres
point.
is
That's a good point. Yeah.
way to invest,
Okay.
especially when they could take the other 10, 15 acres and make that the open space part of that development project. So to me, that's a great asset
Yeah.
that person has.
And I think to that point, sort of what I envision, and maybe I'm crazy, and I'm certainly not a developer and can't pretend to be one, but what I envision is if this bylaw is done to the best of our ability and done right, there's going to be opportunities for development that we don't see, right? Something that's existed for my entire lifetime in this town. I moved here when I was 10 months old, but like that vacant lot across the street from the Roby's lot, across the street from Shaw's, has been vacant my entire life. So it's not a developable piece of property because it's the Roby property, but in 10 years, somebody might buy that and put a bunch of houses there. When I was a kid and I was in high school here, Super Sports existed in town, and Super Sports was going to be on that lot for the rest of my lifetime. It's not there anymore. It's an entirely different use. So what I think in the context of this discussion we have to consider is that some of these lots and these current uses are going to be modified. They're going to change, and they're going to morph into something different over time. And as long as we have that foresight and plan appropriately, I think developers are going to get creative, and they're going to come in and buy a piece of property that we otherwise didn't see. Where the new Agway building's going, for instance, and the glass place was there for a long, long time. That's like 6 acres of land that could have accommodated a small development at one time of this type, if needed. But I don't think that was on anybody's radar as something that was feasible or going to happen there. But I think if a bylaw like this is written correctly and the right areas are identified, things like that are going to happen over time. If we do it right and we make it so that people can take advantage of it, and we can collaborate with developers to do it right, we want it there. That's the area where we want it to happen. We've got the water there. It's near the highway, so we sort of have to figure out a way to incentivize them, not financially, but create opportunities for them to repurpose this land in ways where they can do these developments.
Right. Bill?
You know what's neat? Just sitting here listening to all the comments, you guys are knocking it around the room. Based on what we were talking about before, using the map as a reference, but also using criteria to determine where things are most appropriate on the map. You guys are looking at the PPA areas, PDA areas, and saying, well, this is big, but it has this. This is smaller, but it could accommodate this. So you're taking a realistic view of what's there, and that's where your criteria-based determination is going to come in, using the map as a reference. So Helen's kind of set parameters for you with the map in this format, and now you guys can dig a little deeper into each area like you were talking about, like you were asking Helen to do. But you're doing it on the fly because you know Carver, which is what's going to help us put together that type of bylaw that you're talking about. If we can do it and do it right and really look at what we have, then we can determine where things can go and still retain what we have and shoot for what we want, which was in the master plan. What do we want of Carver?
All right. I'm gonna quickly, if I can, make a suggestion. What if we look at all of basically North Carver, above Purchase Street, Silver Street, and Wenham Road? Obviously, there's a couple of preservation areas in there already, but why don't we try to do like an analysis there and see what's buildable, kind of where the wetlands are, what's going on up there. And then I'm going to show something on the screen, because what we can do in another session, another working session like this, is if we have that area, kind of, if we drill down into that one specific area, then we do have the ability to do some kind of conversation and analysis on the fly. So let's see. This is a program where all the map magic happens. And we have the ability to pull in parcels and the ability to kind of talk about them as a group. That's definitely more than possible. We can have like a working session where we interact with this map, but we just need that area to focus in on.
Well, where it says Muddy Pond there, that dark green area, it's
Yeah.
somewhere in the 80 or 90% already cranberry bogs or high tension utility lines. There might be a couple, maybe 10 acres in that area that's buildable, but it's only accessible by like 15 or 16 foot wide road.
So that's exactly the kind of thing that we would talk about during that working session. It's like we would say, okay, we're going to come here today, we're going to talk about the parcels, and then we could mark them as we go, like upland not accessible, like we could really drill in so we get a realistic picture. But again, we have to if that plan, if you guys are willing to do that at a future meeting, we can certainly do that. It's just kind of, first we would get some information up there, like the wetlands, like things that would help us have that conversation, basically.
And because of the historic nature of small area, the village, the historic district village up there, I would recommend any buildings or development that's actually in the historic area get pre-approved through the Historic District Commission first.
Yeah.
Oh, please, Sarah.
And so I like that idea a lot because it helps us help you. We most of us know, you know, what's where, and and I like Adam's idea too, that okay, so now it's being used as X. Well, maybe if we zoned it so that it could be used as Y, just in case, it's not gonna hurt, you know. And I think Duke's attitude was really good. Instead of saying, well, it's only 10 acres, say, hey, it's 10 acres.
Yeah.
Because you can do a lot on 10 acres. So that's just my take on it. I'd like to do it at maybe the next meeting or something, so that we have all those maps tonight. Or I don't know if you have them now, but
Yeah. I think, I mean, if you guys are willing to do that, we can come back with that information. And it would be like an interactive thing. We would be all kind of zooming around together and doing that.
Does your software have lot lines already in it? Like
It
GIS
does.
does?
It does. Yeah.
Do you use Oliver GIS?
It's all state data. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have access to where our water lines are? I mean, we do have a
Yes.
well in North Carver. I think it's good that we start off in North Carver, because then we can discuss whether we can expand the well system, because that's always been the big problem. Being on the plan board is there's a lot of things that could happen in Carver, but it's because of our well system and our in-ground sewerage that really restricts a lot of density. So it does help if you can bring water in, so you don't have to worry about the distances between the septic systems and the wells. And then also you'd get more water too from a water system than a well.
well, also a lot of these places up there already have their own large private septic systems. So I mean, I don't think we're talking sewer here. They can go up to almost 10,000 gallons. Some of these places. So. I just get very nervous when you start talking about, you know.
Yeah.
Well, we have the town water up there. You're right. So let's use it.
We do have water.
Mhm.
The only thing that I would be, if it's a concern, is if you're putting in a lot of septic in an area where nearby our well. So that that has to be considered too.
But again, and I'm sure you know this, but just up to 10,000 gallons, they can do that.
Mhm.
And then above that, I think there's protections they can put on the septic to make it compatible with, you know, other nearby infrastructure.
You do package above that too.
Yeah.
Package treatment is very strictly regulated.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways, but this
Yeah.
is a great way to look at it, and taking an area and doing an analysis will show you how you can apply criteria to other areas in the town. So like I said, this is kind of like Helen was saying, playing on the fly like that where everybody contributes. That's the whole idea when we kick this up about playing with you and not at you, because you guys are the local experts. That's what we bring in. You take the concept, this is the bylaw, this is what it's supposed to do, these are the tools and the pieces that the bylaw needs to become complete. But it's not a, one size fits all. Every town's gonna be a little different here, so let's fold it in, like you said, make it the best bylaw we possibly can for the town of Carver, because we know change is gonna come, it's inevitable, development's gonna come, it's inevitable, but we can put a good tool in place.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, if I
Yes,
could ask you a
please.
question. The two of you specifically, and Bruce, you two might be in a better position to answer this question for me. For my own edification, as it relates to the North Carver Water District, again, done something before I was a taxpayer myself in town. Would it behoove us to put more up there that could utilize the water line? I mean, it's currently being subsidized by the town and everything else, right? That's sort of an unintended benefit, right, of more use up there. Am I wrong in saying that?
Oh, no,
It
that's-
makes sense for us to try and put more there so that we can use more and make it more
Absolutely.
cost effective to the town?
It's why it's on the preferred development
Yeah.
list, yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Because like you say, right now, we're subsidizing it to a certain extent. We'd like to
I just
stop
I
subsidizing
just
it.
want to make sure I'm not barking up the wrong tree.
Right,
So
like
that-
we'd like to give the Frosty Dog the opportunity to expand and upgrade. They get the lot next door. We'd like to see TDRs used to develop that area. The Frosty Dog isn't used at the moment, and we'd like to see it open up as a commercial area and residential above it. You know, get it up and running.
Okay.
Mr. Tripp, if you keep it brief, please.
I always try to, sir. I just wanted to offer in the spirit of cooperation that the landowners that we were discussing in North Carver are actually all working together to wait and see what happens with this TDR bylaw, because they're very receptive to the concept of welcoming in residential. As you know, the majority of landowners are strip mall owners. It's the the Waterstone Development property, which is the north, which was an old grocery store. That's now 50% occupancy. They have 17.9 acres. The 30 acres you talked about, which is International Golf. And the gas station itself is also coming to it, wanting to work on it, as well as across the street. So that's about 79 acres. And they are willing to work with the town cooperatively. That's one of the reasons why I've been at these meetings since the beginning. So, you know, if you'd like them to come to the meeting as well and have a cooperative effort to work together with the actual landowners. You know, none of them live in the town, but they are landowners, have significant properties and lots of jobs, and they want to be part of this process.
Great, thank you. We'll take that into consideration.
I think, if I could just say, I think some of what might limit the expansion of the water system is a water tower for pressure. And so I don't know how much water can be put out there until we hit the time where, you know, that's it, until we get a water tower.
Mhm.
So, and then I know Mr. Tripp talked about working with, I think at the beginning when we were starting to talk about TDRs, that about maybe developers might want to contribute to a water tower to benefit, you know, building on pieces of land too. So sometimes you can get developers to work with the town to give you some things that could be used by everybody in town, and also, you know, by them to help them with their development. You know, that's the consideration.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
I also have a question as it relates to the water. Does that mean that the historic district, the center of Carver and all South Carver, doesn't have water?
They all three are on the Carver water system. Yes,
It's a different, excuse me.
they're different. Yes,
Different water system. It's not it's not the coal property North Carver wells. The town well is out here.
Right, but we don't know what the capacity is of that.
I think this.
Well, I think we know the capacity. I don't know it, but I think it is
I
known.
thought there were 3 wells back there. No, there's.
Well, I think there's one functioning well.
Okay.
And then there's one in South Carver, but that's in for Cranberry Village.
Okay. So do we know, other than North Carver, if any of the other 2 well areas can take expansion?
You would have to probably talk to the people who run those wells, which is Small Water Systems.
So they're not run by the town, or how does that work?
The town has an agreement with them to run those wells, yeah.
So they really would be the people that could tell us the capacity of those wells?
I'm pretty sure.
Wouldn't that be a consideration for anything that we did outside of North?
Good point, yeah.
And who would we look into for that? Would that be?
Sorry?
Who would we look into as far as?
Mr. LaFawn's still here? Talk to the town administrator.
Yeah, maybe we can
Yeah.
get some information.
Because I mean, the North Carver Water District is in charge of the North Carver wells, but I think they're also on a daily basis, if I'm not mistaken, also run by Small Water Systems.
Yep.
They have the credentials and, you know.
Is there someone I can reach out to?
I would suggest you talk to Mr. LaFawn
Yeah.
and then just,
Will do.
yeah, and
Yep,
maybe he has
I'll
some
take that
contact information.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for our guests this evening? Or maybe she'd like to pull in the map a little bit? Oh, I'm sorry, Chuck.
Yeah, just one thing quickly, I like everything we're speaking about, basically North Carver, but when it comes down to dropping traffic out of the situation on this map, there's something wrong with that, particularly for Center and South Carver. As you know, 195 comes up and hits 495, stops. Well, the only way to get to Route 3 is you go towards the Cape and Bourne, or you take that Tremont Street, which is non-flow traffic during the rush hour. So it's definitely something that has to be considered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so again, unfortunately, I'm not a traffic engineer. We don't have any on our staff. We're not going to be able to help with that. We just, I mean, the only thing I can say about the traffic is that theoretically, if you're using TDR, you're pulling development away from areas that you want to remain rural. So at least you're not creating more local access roads, and things are still being channeled theoretically kind of in the area of those arterial roads, so that you are directing traffic. You're keeping it local to the arterials rather than allowing for the proliferation of house lots that would also bring additional small roads potentially. Yeah.
I think that's my concern, Chuck, with the center area as a development area is, we already have traffic issues at different times during the year, whether it's Edaville or King Richard's Fair. So if we did 3 small developments in this center village area, you're talking about 30, 40 families in that area that are now congested into a relatively small, it's going to add a considerable amount of traffic to downtown. Theoretically, that's diametrically opposed to maintaining rural character. I like driving down the center of town and feeling like I'm in a small town. You start putting these small little 10 lot or 10 house, 10 unit developments in, and that's going to change relatively quickly.
Well, the purpose is to integrate it with the commercial development, so it would be integrated. In other words, if the barn up the road here on the left where the auto parts store is, a developer came in, it would still maintain a commercial aspect, and then they'd have 1 or 2 bedrooms above. And maybe that's something we can push for, is more individual or over 55 houses in the center of town, and that way it would limit both traffic and provide.
I think theoretically, if you put apartments above Carver Square, like above where the church is, right? There was a supermarket when I was a kid when it was first built. If you put residential units above that, you're just going to attract 30 or 40 more families and their cars into downtown Carver.
Right, well, that's why I'm saying maybe we limit the center area to 55 and over, or single bedroom apartments rather than 1,200 foot condominium units or 1,500 foot condominium units.
And Mr. Chair, to Adam's point, it's already permitted to put apartments over the stores and different places,
I
but
think they've done it in a couple up here.
a couple of them. But I feel like we need a more incentive to get more people to do that, because
Because the structures are already,
the
the
structure's
potential's
already
there.
The center's already developed, so you're not developing.
Right. And we could certainly use the housing, the apartments.
You can improve, have someone come in and redevelop the site, because now they have kind of a financial incentive that they can put residential there. But then that residential, not just only generates traffic, but also generates foot traffic for the, any potential stores there. So if you're looking to open up a business, you have a built-in supply of people who are within walking distance of that road.
Yeah, I think I'm not a planner, right, and I'm not a commercial developer, but that commercial enterprise has been there since I was a kid. It was built when I was a kid. It was at one time a thriving center of town, and every business that was in town wanted to be in Carver Square. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be in North Carver. That's why the supermarket that was there isn't there, and it's in North Carver. Ooh, excuse me. So I think it's, you know, we're not gonna build a Derby Street over here. That's what I don't, and Derby Street works because it's within a stone's throw of Route 3. So I understand the concept of it and everything else. I just think it's not, my own personal opinion is it's not consistent with what the vast majority of the citizens in this town, the number one argument we hear about the tax bills in this town are, I'm okay with paying a large tax bill because I want the rural character. So now to take downtown and turn it into, you know, a bunch of mini malls with apartments above them, that is not maintaining the rural character of the town, in my opinion. And in theory, it might be a great idea to have a nice downtown village with houses and homes and families and parks and everything else. But that, to me, that new Carver is significantly different than what we have.
Okay, so can we, so focusing in on that northern section, we'll do some analysis, plan on coming back next time so we can answer some more of these questions, like concretely, like which areas are we really looking at? I did want to just move on really quickly to the text of the bylaw, because as we mentioned, it's like a hybrid approach. We would have a map that would be the basis, kind of the core sending and receiving areas, but then also the flexibility to say you can petition to kind of prove that you are able to, that your lots in question would function as a sending or receiving area.
I'm not sure that, I think that petitioning it kind of takes this whole process out of the context. If somebody can come in and say, well, there's wetlands on the property, therefore it's important. I think it has to be pretty cut and dry. If they want to expand it at a future date, they can come to town meeting, or the planning board could propose to expand areas to be brought to the town meetings. But I think you're really taking a lot out of it by anybody coming in and proposing whatever they want because there's natural vegetative state, or that I got water on my property.
Okay, is that a common feeling?
I'm sorry, Helen, I didn't hear what you actually said, so I don't know how to respond to it.
Sure. Just the idea that we have provision, I wrote it in here, it's right now the amended 2720
Okay.
applicability. So there's a sending area, it talks about the map, obviously, like if it's on the map, it's on the map. But second, applicants can petition the planning board to accept a parcel outside of the mapped sending area for TDR sending area status by proving that the parcel in question has the core attributes of a sending area parcel. The applicant must prove that the parcel in question has at least one of the following significant preservation-worthy attributes: that it's water source protection land, that there's intact forest, that there's significant wildlife habitat as defined by certain data sets, that there's areas in the special flood hazard areas, it's adjacent to other preserved lands, or that it contains significant wetland areas. So those were the criteria that we came up with on the top of our, just from our own familiarity with things like cluster subdivision bylaws, for example. But certainly they can be amended. They don't have to all be in there. If wetlands is too broad, it certainly can be stricken while still keeping some of those other criteria. Or the other option is to just go based on the map. The only issue with that is, a really great parcel might come up that is worthy of preservation, and then someone would have to go through a whole nother zoning amendment process to be able to use it per this program. So to us, it kind of opens up some room for flexibility and it's still at the determination of the planning board ultimately.
Fran?
Connie, I agree with you. As we all know, this has been on the books for several years and hasn't been used. And so that's why we're being charged with identifying those parcels.
Yeah.
And we've already kind of talked about the people here are the people who know the best about the town and where the parcels are. And I think for step one, we should just try to get this correct, tight and correct, and see how it goes.
Yeah, I agree.
Wait,
Okay.
Mr. Eddings?
I just want to make sure I'm clear with it. So, kind of like when we were talking about whether we want building in the center of town that's already there. The transfer of development rights is to enhance the density beyond what's already there that's granted in a bylaw, correct? So I just go to the definitions and I see what it's like the NUDA is 6 times the level that can go in. And I guess, like what Adam's saying is, I don't want 6 times the buildability over there. I mean, I think it ruins the look of this town. I can't help but say that.
I would agree. I wouldn't trade one house for 6 houses density on that.
No, but I'm trying to say, like, North Carver, when we talk about that 10 acres, we wanna have and give a developer to come in and do business in our town, then we wanna put certain areas that we can say, yeah, we're gonna have you come in, and we're gonna give you 6 times the amount of units that you could put anywhere else in this town if you go to North Carver.
Right.
Or if you go to this area.
Yeah.
I just think that when we going over these maps and we start to say, well, anybody can come in from anywhere as long as they go in front of a board and say they meet a certain criteria. I think we open it up to incentivize areas that we might not want.
I think that we should also make the distinction that you could leave, for example, the sending area open to criteria, but keep the receiving area very tight. That way, like, we might just not capture a really important, pristine part of Carver that, in the sending area, right? So we have sending areas up here, they're in the green, but why limit yourselves to that if kind of land preservation generally and keeping the rural character generally is important, then maybe it is okay to have these criteria for the sending parcels.
I think the issue too is that the receiving areas are very limited in this town and what they can take and what's available to us, so that our sending areas have to be of primary critical importance to the town and not outside of that particular.
Yeah, and
Please,
this is
Bill.
one of the things when we were thinking about the flexibility, something that Helen just alluded to. If you get flexibility with the sending areas, then you can apply criteria to it, and it goes back more to what, Sarah, you were talking about way back when you say it would be great if we could get all these areas that were in the open space plan. It allows you the flexibility to put more of those areas in without plastering a map that when you look at it said, okay, Carver's 82% protected, we can't come in and develop anyway. You're saying, whoa, wait a minute, we might like it in North Carver, but we might like to preserve this down here, and this land, fits this criteria for sending units, or sending areas, so that's the thing, that's where the flexibility can come, and you can have really tight restrictions on your receiving areas.
So are you saying to keep all these definitions of sending areas? Are you suggesting what I think I'm hearing is you're saying sending areas are everything that's not a receiving area. Is that what I'm hearing? Am I hearing that right?
Not everything. That's not everything. Not everything that's not a receiving area, but everything that could meet one of these criteria.
Well, it's hard to.
Yeah.
But this doesn't capture all the sending areas. Okay. So what if it's just that when I drive down Meadow Street, it's a beautiful street.
Mm-hmm. Well,
who wants to see that go away? It may not. It has a lot of wetlands too. But supposing it didn't, supposing it were just, the best place to watch the leaves turn in Carver in the autumn. That's not in this criteria. Whoops, I guess, it doesn't count as a sending area, but it really should. So I get very nervous about narrowing down what's a sending area. I'd rather really be specific about the receiving areas.
Well, and I think that's, I don't mean to interrupt, Sarah.
That's
I apologize
okay. No,
if I am.
it's okay.
Building on what Fran said, and then that's what I was going to say is I think the more flexible we are with these sending areas and we give the opportunity to do exactly what you're saying, especially through a petition process. The bylaw's not doing it by right. It's saying, wait a minute, we didn't identify Meadow Street as a beautiful area to watch the leaves fall, and therefore as part of a sending area, but it meets the criteria according to the planning board to give the developer credit for that sending area. I think building the flexibility into the sending area. If we were as a committee, we're talking about what we're most concerned with. I'd say it's like 80-90% the receiving area,
Yeah.
as opposed to the sending
I
area.
agree.
Most of the sending areas we're talking about are area upland around bogs and things of that nature that are beautiful areas that we want to preserve. I think incentivizing developers to preserve those sending areas
Right.
is the intent of this. And by providing more flexibility in that definition of where those are, we're more likely to accomplish what we want, and that is the right development in the right area. But let's be a little bit more restrictive or careful with the definitions for the receiving areas.
Exactly.
And maybe
That's-
less liberal on petitions for the receiving
That's
areas.
what I was saying.
Yep.
I'm thinking maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it's that word petition, because that bothers me too. Do you mean that they have to get a special permit?
No. Well, it could be. I don't really know.
This
That's
is
up to you.
a special permit, right? To
Yeah.
do this would require.
Yeah, yeah.
So why don't we just say that? Because this implies that someone can just come and make up, why their land is a sending area. And then it's up to whoever happens to be on planning board that year.
I do kind of think that's what, because the whole process is a special permit process, right? So would we have to specify another special permit process within this section, or can it just be part of the application package?
No, I don't think that's really what I was.
There's actually multiple special permits to the process.
Yeah. Okay.
The TDR bylaw is like an umbrella, and within that, you could have a mixed-use development, you could have a townhouse development, you could have an accessory unit over. All these sections of the bylaw are actually affected by TDRs when you look at the increased density. The good thing about you prolonging this is that you should look at all those other sections and bring them into compliance with the TDR bylaw, and now have the time to do that. It makes a lot of sense.
All right. So we need.
I think once we identify the correct areas in town to be receiving areas, we'll have a better idea
Yeah.
of what we need to put in the rest of the bylaw to make it go right.
I agree.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
Because if we end up with only 500 receiving areas and we're allowing people to come in and pick and choose where they want to send it for, then it's not going to preserve the areas in town that we're most concerned with.
Yep,
Uh,
I agree.
the 10 acres behind the dump. Sure, it's accessible, it's near the highway, it has woodlands, water, and everything like that, but is that an area that's significant to the town to preserve? And I think we should kind of limit it to the same with the sending and receiving areas. Let's come up with a cohesive map and see where we're at, and then if we have room to allow these choices to come in, then I would say that yes, we can move forward with that. But I think we should limit it to what's available, because right here on the first page it's preferred development areas 261 parcels, and already our preferred protection area is 527, and that's just on this map. And if you take a fair percentage out for the wetlands or undevelopable areas, it's still going to be a much higher PPA than a PDA. And I think we should lock in what we want first and then open the doors afterwards.
Sure. Sounds like good marching orders. I'll say just two quick things to get them on the record. When we do kind of come back to this, if we come back to this criteria list, we can definitely add things like scenic vistas. Like there's other language we can, put in to kind of get at exactly what you guys want to be the sending areas. They're difficult. The difficult, and again, this is your guys' town. I'm just here to say think the devil's advocate, right? Like think about this. If you do want to see some housing development up in that northwest corner, and you have these areas that you are really important to you to preserve, but then there's another tier that maybe don't make the map. It just, because the development of the housing is tied to the sending parcel, if you don't get someone to come along and want to work with a particular sending parcel, you're not going to get the housing. So it is kind of potentially limiting the pool you might not get a developer for those parcels that you want to be the first tier sending parcels.
Right, but if we have
Yeah.
1,000 sending parcels and 200 receiving parcels, I think that's something that will work. It's
Willing to take the risk. That's fine. That's fine. Okay.
And I do like the in the North Carver area the quarter-mile buffer. I think that's, and in some areas I would even extend it out to the half-a-mile buffer in that area too.
Okay. We'll look at the whole area above that street, kind of that.
Especially north of 58 and anywhere immediately close to the highway.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This has been extremely helpful, and I'm happy to take more questions and keep chatting. No rush at all. But I feel like I have a good direction.
But
for
Bill,
sure.
One more thing that Sarah brought up before, we might be able to look at this too, Ellen, is the fact that in your open space plan, you always say, what about those areas? I mean, some of this stuff is really, if you look at Helen's criteria, it's really defined, natural heritage, endangered species, biomap 2, floodplains, flood district, all of that's mapped, like down to the inch. But if you look in the open space plan, you have a criteria in there for unique environments, scenic views and unique environments.
Yep.
Those are the things where people list their kind of what I call heart and soul items in there. And those are the areas that might slip through the cracks. So if you have enough open space plan that defines those areas and we look at it and see if it's a little different from what's going on in that map, then that's the kind of stuff you can put in criteria to define where if someone's coming in close to, you say, well, we have a unique environment, scenic view and vista right here that we've defined and agreed upon as a community and has been certified by the state.
Yeah.
We'd like you to maybe consider that too. So that's where that flexibility can help you guys out. That's where, you're thinking big picture like that too. You add it all in.
yeah.
Gives you a few more options and make sure, again, you get to be what you want to be as Carver. That's
Right,
the bottom line.
because we can put a
Right.
lot of sending units on here. It's not necessarily limited to what's on the map. We can add them all in. I mean, there's no reason, and then the developer has much more options to
Mhm.
deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna just, for next time, I'm gonna kind of put the text of the bylaw aside and come back prepared for a working session about North Carver. And a few days, with a week about a week ahead of time, I'll provide a static map of wetlands and well and different attributes. But then we'll be able to interact with it that day.
And for our members that are interested and have the time, you can go onto the Mass Oliver GIS system. It's the state mapping system. It will bring you all the way down. It will give you satellite views. It will give you property lines. It will show you where all the roads are, every tree is, and it will give you a good working knowledge on a macro basis rather than
I think it
the
shows
larger maps.
the topography too, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
topography.
which shows all the wetlands
It'll
too.
tell you all the wetlands. It'll give you distances from all the ponds, rivers, and streams that are currently protected.
Thank you guys for your time. I slightly hesitate to give this out because I'm afraid if we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I'm going to give it out since I printed the paper, used the paper. But this is for much further down the line. If you can just hold on to it, includes a first. It's a second version after the first update that focuses in on the TDR credit calculation piece. So we'll pass this around and kind of have, so just to get like our brains thinking in that direction down the line. What we kind of are thinking about is including some, like you'll see diagrams that kind of clarify the TDR process and really making sure that we focus in on that receiving area maximum capacity, because that's something I think is missing from the existing bylaw. There's sending area credits and what the receiving area NULA is, and there's not kind of a good language about the nexus between the two, like needing to equal each other, and that the remainder goes into the TDR bank for future use. So feel free to peruse this at your own time, but again, I think we're pretty far away from this discussion.
Yes, Sam.
I just wanted to ask Helen and Bill if, when they get these maps up and maybe this too, could you send them to us digitally as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, the diagrams are kind of hard to read, but they're small.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to blow it up and,
10 cents a page.
yeah,
Thank you.
10 cents a page. Wait a sec.
Showing my age.
Right.
While we have them here, does anybody have any further questions comments for Helen and Bill? They've been an exceptional help, and I can't thank them enough for putting us on a right track. We tend to be.
Thank you guys, and also, and like I said before, just we're really here to help implement your vision and just kind of bring up probing questions on the way. I'm never trying to force anything down your throat or anything, so just here to help. Yeah.
When can we look forward to
Thanks.
maybe interacting with you guys again?
Next meeting.
The next
Next
meeting?
meeting?
Next meeting, they said they'd come
Sets-
back, yeah.
All right.
February 3rd?
Yeah, that's next week.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're gonna rock and roll and work, roll up the sleeves.
Yep.
That'd be great, can't wait for it.
So you guys gotta think between now and February 3rd of what your vision is for here and maybe what we can do up there and.
Yeah. And if you guys do have only because the screen is a little far away, if we're all kind of talking together about certain parcels, if you do have access to like a laptop or tablet or something, it might be good to bring it that day just to be able to. Yeah.
Good idea.
So we have the minutes,
I would
we didn't get those,
I would accept a motion to put those off to the next meeting, if that's acceptable to the
Okay.
group.
Just for a point, I didn't realize how much short time I had to get the agenda out, so we had the holiday and then we had this meeting coming up
Yeah?
sooner, so I didn't get a chance to include the minutes, so,
Don't beat yourself up, you're doing a great job, Jim.
okay, thanks.
I'll pat you on the back if that's still allowed these days.
all right, I'll make a motion to table the minutes of January 20th, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do we have to do a roll
Oh.
call vote?
Yeah.
Yeah, roll call. Bruce Mackey, aye.
Cornelius Shea says aye.
Sarah Hewen says aye.
Chuck Meredith, aye.
Fran Mello, aye.
Adam Holmes says aye.
All right.
Next meeting.
Mr. Chair, who is taking minutes of this meeting? Jim?
I sort of am.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I have to, I'll go back to the tape. Next-
Area 58 here.
Next meeting, Bill and Helen say they'll be available, so I'd recommend that February 3rd be set. That's all right with you, Jim? And,
Thank you both for being here.
yeah,
Really
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
appreciate it.
very much.
very, very much, yeah.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Any
Oh,
opposed?
right. Whoops, we have to do it. Roll call.
Okay.
We gotta do a roll call because it's,
Yeah.
yeah. Bruce Mackey, aye.
Cornelius Shea, aye.
Sarah Hewen says aye.
Chuck Meredith, aye.
Fran Mello, aye.
Adam Holmes aye.
Thank you very much.